Welcome. Today is the second Sunday of Advent. We now have 2 candles lit. We're continuing our story of Tabitha's Travels by Arnold Detrita. Today's chapter is titled False Arrest. Tabitha felt her knees go weak and thought her legs would not hold her as Roman soldiers circled her and her father. But she was confident this would all be cleared up in a moment. Ripping the covering from her head, she shouted at the Roman, "I'm no boy! I'm his daughter Tabitha!" The Roman stood back in shock. He stared from Tabitha to her father and back several times. Finally his eyes narrowed and his forehead wrinkled. "What game is this you play?" he asked. "Do you try to make fools of the Roman legion?" No, Eliakim stammered. "Some thieves were watching my daughter." "Silence!" the Roman shouted. Then in a low growl he said, "I have searched a month for the runaway slave boy and his fool friend. I must now report back to the procurator in Jerusalem, and I will not go there without a Jew in custody." Looking around for a moment, he suddenly turned to Eliakim and said, "Show me the bill of sale for these 3 horses." Eliakim went pale. We traded for them in Hebron and left quickly. There was no time for—" "Seize them!" the Roman commander roared, and immediately Eliakim and his 2 brothers closed in. "You are under arrest for thievery!" the centurion yelled. Tabitha screamed as the soldiers ripped her hand from her father's tunic and pushed him forward. She pulled at the Roman leader's cape, but he turned and kicked her down with his foot and then mounted his horse. "Father!" she cried. "Please don't take my father!" But the Romans didn't even slow down. Eliakim fought to free himself to protect his daughter. But 3 Romans held him tightly, tied his arms behind his back, and tied the rope to one of their horses. The anger of a mad camel overtook Eliakim, and he rammed and kicked the 3 soldiers until they were lying on the ground. Free of his captors for a moment, but with his arms still tied, he shouted at the centurion, "I am a citizen of Rome. You have no right to treat me so." Instantly all the soldiers stopped and stared. The centurion leaned over, low in his saddle, to get a closer look. "You're no Roman," he said after a careful inspection. "You are a dog Jew, a shepherd, and a liar." "I am a citizen of Rome," Eliakim said defiantly, "and I will see you hung for this cruel treatment unless you release me at once." The centurion eyed his prisoner slowly and then said, "If you be a citizen, then you will have the parchment to prove it." For the first time, Eliakim seemed a bit unsure of himself. "I have such a parchment," he said, and the Roman looked up in surprise. "They are with my family in Hebron," he said. A look of disgust crossed the centurion's face. "A lie like all the rest," he said. Then to the soldiers he commanded, "Mount!" "Tabitha!" Eliakim cried as the soldier jerked him into motion. "Tabitha!" he called again over his shoulder. "Run to Qumran, a day to the north. Find someone to help you to Hebron. Tell Ananias to bring my scrolls to Jerusalem." The centurion kicked his horse into action and yelled to his men, "Ride!" A dozen horses now galloped up the road, dragging Eliakim and his 2 brothers. "Father!" Tabitha screamed as she watched the 3 men stumbling to keep up with the horses. "Please, please don't take my father!" Then they were gone into the night. Alone, Tabitha sat in the dust of the road, crying for her father. She also mourned the fact that she was now alone, abandoned outside one of the most evil cities she had ever. Tabitha suddenly looked up toward the city gate. That guard in the window above was eyeing her. He whispered something to another man, who left the window quickly. Tabitha gulped down her fear and sorrow and forced herself to her feet. Swinging around this way and that, looking at the stars and the moon, she finally found north as her father had taught her. Behind her, the city gates creaked, and she she decided she didn't want to wait and see who was coming out. As fast as her sandaled feet would take her, she ran off into the night, up the road that led to the north. Tabitha had traveled only a few hundred paces when she heard footsteps in the dirt behind her. She couldn't see anything in the moonlight, but she knew someone was there. The roadway was close to the sea at this point, but far above it. How far, Tabitha could not tell. Jumping over the side of the road, she hoped it was a gradual slope. She also hoped there were no snakes out this night. As she slipped over the edge and began to fall, she grabbed at a bush and hung there. Her feet could find nothing but the air below. As the bush's roots weakened and Tabitha felt herself slipping down the hill toward the sea of death, she heard a voice hissing out of the darkness above. "Small girl," the voice called, "come to me now." "Come to me now," the voice said again, "and I will hurt you less." Psalm 27 says, "Though an army besiege me, my heart will not fear. Though war break out against me, even then will I be confident." Could you really pray that prayer and mean it? Could you really face an army of problems, a war of personal attacks, and not be afraid? Why does God allow terrible things to happen to his people? Why doesn't he simply step in and keep evil out of our lives? That's a very old question, and that has a very old answer. God has given us the freedom to choose his way or not. We can choose to accept him and treat others with love, or to reject him and be selfish. But he can't give us freedom of choice 1 minute and take it away the next minute. He can't give freedom of choice to one person and not to someone else. In short, he has to give evil people that same freedom he gives all his children. So, bad things continue to happen. What God can and will do, though, is be with us through those times, no matter what. He'll hold our hands, give us strength to endure, and ultimately see us through to the victory of eternal life with him. And I have a picture to show you. Here's Tabitha singing to that bush on the side of the hill.